welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and I turned a Victorian poem into a song. And I want to tell you how that went, what I did and how I did it. But if you want to skip straight to the song, there is a timestamp in the description box, so you can just click on that and hear the song. And you can even download the song if you are so inclined. The download link is on my Patreon page, patreon.com/SpinstersLibrary. Although don't worry, you don't have to be a Patreon member to access that. I wouldn't dream of charging you for that. But I suggest that you stick around and let me tell you about this little project and how it happened. First, I knew that I wanted to turn a Victorian poem into a song because I had, after 4 years of not playing any instruments really, I had the inexplicable urge to make some music. I was for a brief moment worried that I had been possessed maybe, or that there were other supernatural forces at play, but then I resigned to the fate and I dug out my guitar. Very quickly realized that my skills were not what they used to be. If I was going to write a song, it was going to be a simple one. So, resigned to that fact, I then went on to Twitter to ask about Victorian poetry recommendations, because I am not a fan of poetry. I don't connect with it very well, and there are very few poems that really speak to me in the way that I think poetry is meant to speak to people who enjoy it. So I went onto Twitter and I asked for Victorian poetry recommendations, and one name that kept coming up was Christina Rossetti. Obviously I was aware of her, but I had never read any of her works. I went onto the Poetry Foundation website, which is poetryfoundation.org. I will also link that in the description box. And I had a little click around her poems and very quickly found the one that I wanted to set to music. This poem is called A Daughter of Eve, and I will put the full text onto the end of the video when I actually show you the song as well. It's a very simple 3-stanza poem, and the language spoke to me straight away because of its use of very straightforward, very modern sounding language that at the same time has a very sort of poetic wistfulness about it. And there were some lines that really spoke to my sad, anxious, gothy heart. Lines like, "Beneath the comfortless cold moon." Whew, spooky. The last line of the poem, "I sit alone with sorrow," genuinely gives me shivers. So I read this poem through a few times and I liked the ambiguity of it. I liked the hints of loss and regret mixed with a sort of sinful sexuality that, again, really just made this stand out from the poems that I had looked at previously. In terms of the structure of the poem, I know enough about songwriting to know that a poem is not the ideal lyrical composition for a piece of pop music, and that's because of the structure. The poem has 3 stanzas made up of 5 lines each, and nothing that could be easily turned into a chorus, whereas pop and rock music lives from a chorus, a hook, something that gets stuck in your head. I also knew that I didn't want to mess with the poem too much. I didn't want to take it apart and put it back together in a way that made it more of a conventional song structure. So I had to work with these 3 equal size stanzas without having a chorus or the middle 8 or the pre-chorus to work with. So I guess that set my expectations of myself pretty low. I haven't played any instrument in years, number 1. Number 2, I don't actually know how to play half of the instruments I'm intending to use on this track. And number 3, if I'm lucky, this song is going to be longer than 2 minutes. So then, I guess, I sat down and tried to come up with a thing. Oh, the 4th limitation that I had, other than my skill, the structure of the poem, and whatever the other one was that I mentioned earlier, is that I'm not in possession of a full music studio setup here. In my office, I have a MIDI keyboard, which is pretty cute. I mean, it's genuinely adorable. I don't have a piano here or an electric keyboard or anything that I could use to just mess around with, other than the little MIDI keyboard. My own guitar, which, as I've mentioned, I hadn't played for years, and a whole array of my husband's instruments, namely an electric guitar, an electric bass, which for some unknown reason has a 5th string. I have access to his silent guitar, which is supposed to emulate a steel string acoustic guitar. Did I mention I can't play any of these instruments? I'd never in my life played a bass before, for example. I know technically how it works, right? I know what the strings are, I know how to play acoustic guitar, so I had a basic theoretical idea of how to play a bass. But still, that made the choice for me to start writing this song with a bass line. Well, let's say I don't know how I did that, but that was indeed where I started. I sat down at the little MIDI keyboard and plugged it into the computer, and then ended up with this. Stopped and I thought, oh dear. I didn't think oh dear, I actually thought fuck, but I'm trying to do this with as little profanity as possible. I thought, oh dear, did I just rip off the bass line to Zombie by the Cranberries? I didn't want to actually check the bass line for Zombie in case I would then plagiarize even more. But throughout this entire songwriting process, I kept thinking, oh no, I've ripped off Zombie. After getting that bass line down, it was an easy enough process to figure out chords and other little melodies here and there. Eventually I had a song. Unfortunately, I still insisted on having some sort of chorus type bit. So I decided to repeat the 4th line of every stanza to make that work. I then started thinking about sort of sounds and genres and how I wanted the song to sound. And again, that inspiration came from the poem itself. It reminded me in its sort of melancholic simplicity of The Cure. The bass line that I'd come up with also kind of gave me that sort of late 80s goth synth pop vibe. So I kind of leaned into that with the writing of the piece. But then I did want it to be heavier. I wanted it to have distorted guitars on it. I wanted it to be a bit more, I guess, lean into the alternative rock music that I enjoyed in the early and mid 2000s. So the songwriting being done at this point, I had to face the problems of actually recording the song. And again, I had to lower my expectations quite a bit, knowing that I'm just not that good a performer. I'm fully aware of my capabilities and of how I had to make the technicalities of the song as simple as possible so I could just get on with it and record it. Because I did want to record everything myself. Not that I have any other choice. Bill is currently on visit in England, so unless I could somehow get my cats to play the electric bass, I somehow had to figure out how to do it. You know, playing the bass is really hard. We don't give bass players enough credit. Bass players generally being the butt of the musical joke. It's not fair. Hashtag justice for bass players. Before I got to the bass playing, I fought with the recording software, which I used Reaper, which Bill luckily has a license for. And I laid down a little, I don't know, what do you call it, a reference track on the MIDI keyboard. Well, I guess then I started building up the song. The first issue was the guitar, because Bill has this absolutely gorgeous looking but ancient electric guitar, which just didn't work. After buying a new cable and waiting for that to arrive, I opened up the little, what you call it, where you plug in the cable, and it was deteriorated, crumbling apart and rusty, and I don't understand what Bill had been doing with this guitar. Maybe just dunking it in the sea for fun. Anyway, it was completely unusable. It still is. It's gotta be repaired somehow. And I didn't have an electric guitar to put on the track. Now, if you were one of the 3 people watching this who knew me at age 17, you might say, hey, what happened to that black and white guitar that you had? You called it Jack. What happened to Jack? My mother gave Jack away. Didn't ask my permission for it. She called me up one day and said, oh, you know that guitar, that electric guitar that you had as a teenager? You don't need that, do you? And I said, well, I mean, I'd quite like to at some point maybe take it back, you know, maybe when we have a new flat, when we've got a bit more space. She said, oh, but you know, so-and-so's daughter really wants to play the guitar, so I gave it to her. So I had no guitar other than the aforementioned silent guitar. I played around with it, plugged it into the weird mixing pedal that I'm still mostly confused about, and realized that it was a close enough approximation of electric guitar sound that I could use that instead. Then there was the issue of performance. I, as I said, don't play electric guitar. I tried to play with a pick and I could not do it. So again, I thought, fuck it, I'm going to fingerpick my way through the song. Unfortunately, that meant that as I was recording it, I had to stop when my nail bed started bleeding from trying to play the power chords in the chorus, which means that the guitar on the final track is not one that I'm very happy with. Definitely could have done with another 5 or 6 takes to get it actually sounding good, but when my fingers start bleeding, I thought I should probably stop. So only 2 things to be done: voice and drums. I don't have a drum kit here, and even if I did, I wouldn't know how to play it. So the drums had to be programmed, and Bill, luckily, has software for this as well, a virtual instrument called Jamsticks, which is very complex, very comprehensive, but programmed drums that try to sound like real drums almost never get it right. I don't like the sound of that, and even though Jamsticks is incredibly sophisticated in what it can do, I did not want to go down the route of trying to fool people into thinking it's real drums, because that gets you into the sort of auditory uncanny valley, which no one wants to really be in. So for drums, I decided to go quite pop with them, meaning very simple and understated, not trying to sound human. I didn't mind them sounding like machine-programmed drums, because at least they could do that with conviction. And then the final, and frankly, my personal biggest insecurity, was the singing. I am not a good singer, and I have no pretensions of ever becoming a good singer. So I just had to get over myself and sing the damn song, which I did, very proud of myself, and I did that entirely without alcohol. And that's how I came to make a song. It's not perfect by any means. You can tell that it has been a while since I last indulged in musical practice of any kind, but I think it's not bad. When I asked myself if I did the poem justice, obviously the answer is no, because it is an absolutely stunning piece of writing, and I turned it into a weird approximation of 2006 indie rock. So no, I didn't do the poem justice, but I did myself justice. For where I'm at musically, technically, in terms of skills and in terms of creativity, I think it did a decent job enough for myself. And that's really all I can ask of myself. And maybe one day I'll have another go at this, at turning another poem into a song. But until then, here is the song with the lyrics on the screen, so you can enjoy the genius, the passion, the sadness, the melancholy, all of the feelings that have been put into this absolutely stunning poem, A Daughter of Eve by Christina Rossetti. Thank you for watching.
Fool I was to sleep at noon and wake when night is chilly beneath the comfortless cold moon. A fool to pluck my rose too soon. A fool to pluck my rose. A fool to pluck my rose too soon. A fool to pluck my rose. A fool to snap my lily. My garden plot have I not kept, faded and all forsaken. I weep as I have never wept. Oh, it was summer when I slept. 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 It's winter now I waken. Talk what you please of future spring and sun warm sweet tomorrow, stripped bare of hope and everything. No more to love, no more to sing. 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 I sit alone with sorrow.